Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou te whare. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by his statement yesterday that, quote, giving the odd kid a lunch, that is not actually going to fix the problem? What will fix the problem is paying $50,000 to a world-class principal to go in and fix up a school that is failing those kids, end quote.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I stand by my full statement, which began with, when it comes to education, we will not say the answer to fixing the whole problem in the education system is giving the odd kid a lunch.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Is the Prime Minister saying with his statement to the country that he believes that the main cause of underachievement is that the principals and teachers in lower decile schools, where underachievement is concentrated, are no good at their job and are failing their pupils?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, what I am saying is that the single biggest thing we can do to help young New Zealanders of all backgrounds is a world-class education. What I'm also saying is that it's actually quite difficult sometimes to attract the very best principals to small underperforming schools, and one of the biggest changes we can make is to pay a premium of $50,000 to attract one of those world-class principals to those schools. I personally happen to think that if you can put fabulous principal in charge of a school and fantastic teachers in front of those children, that you're much more likely to make a big difference than giving them lunch.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does the Prime Minister accept the PISA finding that family and out-of-school factors, like being well-fed and well-housed, account for more than 75% of the difference between high and low performing New Zealand schools? Yes, it is true, Mr.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What I prefer to rely on is Andreas Schleicher, who is actually the architect of PISA. And this is his exact quote when he spoke to the New Zealand media not so long ago on 9 to Noon, when he said another part of the education that is actually underperformance in New Zealand isn't actually all about poor kids in poor neighbourhoods. You know, there are actually many kids in more advantaged neighbourhoods where you can see performance challenges. Mr Speaker, I think the reality is that there are two factors that make a big difference to children's ability to learn at school. One is the home they come from, and the second is ultimately the teachers and the principals that are in front of those kids. We can't always potentially change one of those factors, but we can certainly heavily influence the other. Secondly, the government provides enormous support to those at-risk families. That included this government borrowing tens of billions of dollars through the worst of the recession to support the most at-risk families in New Zealand.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, what then is his response to the Principals Federation, some of whose members would benefit from his policy, who have praised the Greens School Hubs plan, saying that out-of-school influences like decent food have by far the biggest influence on underachievement?
Oh, well, I suppose...
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I suppose the way to respond to that is to quote the Principals Federation then, who said, and I quote, "It's hard for me to say, but it's a pretty damned impressive amount. It's a huge amount of new money, and I've never seen such a transformation of ideas and discussion into policy and money in my life." Sounds to me like they're backing the National Party.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister not understand that it is impossible to fix, I quote, underperformance simply by helicoptering in 20 high-paid principals when he knows that 75% of the influence on underachievement is family background and out of those principals' control?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Firstly, I think the member's just plain wrong. And then secondly, Mr Speaker, I think the member is not doing justice to that very fine policy from the National Party. It's not 20 change principles. It's actually 100 over a period of time, 5 years. It's also 5,000 lead teachers. It's a large number of executive principals and of expert teachers. It's $150 million per year to lift the performance of all of our schools and principals across the country. And Mr Speaker, let's be blunt. I came from a state house and a solo mother. I happen to go to a world-class school with world-class teachers, and I'm now Prime Minister of New Zealand. And frankly, I think that made a bigger difference than me having some other things.
Point of order.
Respect the Prime Minister.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
The Prime Minister had ample time to answer that question without trying to show...
Order. Can the member just come to the point of his point of order?
Well, the point is very, very clear as daylight. He's had far too long to answer the question, and I'm asking you to stop
Order.
him.
And if the member wants the privilege of asking question number 4 in the House, then he'll allow me to run question time. It was an answer that was... it was quite a lengthy question that was asked, and I thought the Prime Minister was attempting to genuinely answer the question. I will decide when I think a minister, be a Prime Minister or any other, has spoken for too long in his answer, not the Right Honourable Winston Peters. Further supplementary?
Point of order, Speaker.
Point of order.
You're not surely suggesting that I have not the right to raise a point of order about the length of a question, are you?
Order. The member will resume his seat. No, I'm not suggesting that. But I am telling the member, it's not a suggestion, I am telling the member that I will decide, the member can certainly raise the point of order, I will ultimately decide when, or I'm on my feet, I will ultimately decide when I think an answer's gone on too long, and I've done that on 2 or 3 occasions already in this question time. Further supplementaries?
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the 1970s welfare state was so good to the Prime Minister when he was a child, will he consider reviving some of the core policies that were in place at that time, such as secure state housing, a universal child benefit, and genuinely free public education to every child now? And if he won't, why does he believe today's kids are not entitled to the same support that he had when he was a child?
Order. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister concerned that the chance of people like him escaping poverty and doing well has become close to impossible under his watch, when the percentage of poorer children who are achieving at the highest levels has now dropped from 6% in 2009 to just 4% in 2012?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased yesterday when I described the opposition as deluded, because the member has absolutely demonstrated that. Over the course of the last 5 years of this national government, we have poured in enormous resources supporting the most at need. We have lifted, I think, the resources going into education, which is the single biggest factor to help young New Zealanders, and to make the case that somebody could go to school today, arguably be of, say, 15 years of age, be in year 11, had the last 5 years at school under a national-led government, and for them to be condemned to never doing well because they grew up in a poor household shows how out of touch that member is.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When will the Prime Minister drop his inequality denial and admit that his policies are creating a growing class of people who sit at the bottom of the most unequal education system in the developed world?
Right Honourable Prime
Mr.
Minister.
Speaker, again, the member is just completely and utterly wrong. She wants to be in denial, but the penultimate findings in this area done by MSD, they are basically the findings by Mr Perry, which has shown that actually income inequality hasn't been widening in the last 10 years. They have been very consistent over the last 10 years. If the member wants to cut and paste information so she can mislead her supporters, she's welcome to do so, but in fact income inequality is not growing in New Zealand.
Question number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.